So I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about things that I'm learning and relearning as I go along being a mother. I just dropped off my child to kindergarten or preschool or whatever you want to call it, and he's only 11 months old. It's been very rocky for me. He actually likes it, I think. I found it a difficult transition. And at the beginning he was very, very happy about it because he's very sociable. And then he was crying, but a lot of the crying was because I'm dealing with baby asthma, and I was on a crazy protocol which I've now dropped, which involved electronic inhalation every 3 or 4 hours, and it was just horrible. And I've been dealing with a lot of hard things in the background. The situation here is challenging, and I have lots of challenges. I'm practically speaking, but I'm dealing with stuff, and he has asthma, which is triggered when he gets a virus. So he goes to kindergarten, he gets a virus, then I get sick, then he has an asthma attack, then we have to go to emergency. It's challenging. But one thing that I have to say, that having a baby, how it makes your life different, is that I can't emphasize this enough. When you're single, even if you're older, when you're single, well, it depends on the personality type, I guess. But when you're older and you're single, meaning you're 30s, 40s, or 50s, because you're like young, free, and single, you buy into this idea that your life is dynamic because you're a consumer. Sorry about the background noise. Because you're a consumer and you have money, and if someone wants to sell you something, like on a generalized level, they want you to feel good about yourself and powerful, and then convince you to spend their money with them. So if, for example, you live in the city, as I do, as you can tell by all the background noise, then you would walk around, you'll see all these bars, you'll see all these restaurants, you'll see all these cafes, you'll see all these shops, you'll see all these eateries, and the system is just designed not by conspiracy but by human psychology, because it's selling goods that has to provoke a desire in human beings. So of course it's going to hijack our psychology, because what we really need, we just need food, shelter, water, and social approval. So it's hijacking on the social approval, and it's approving of you socially by making you feel powerful and that you have a choice. And the thing about money is that it's power in potentiality. So if you hold it, then you can spend it on whatever you want. So it's just a piece of paper, but it allows you like a so-called infinite menu of things to do. So you can feel like you're a very dynamic person who has lots of choices every day, and you can actually be very stuck in your life and not realize that you're stuck in your life because you have this fabulous life. Or maybe it's not fabulous, maybe it's just miserable and lonely, but you're surrounded, you're being tortured by being miserable and lonely because you're surrounded by all of this choice that you're not exercising. And what can happen is that when you go by that and then you have a baby, there's like oh my god, there's just so much noise here. There's like a huge awakening that happens, and the reason I'm pointing this out is not if you're thinking of having a baby to torture you with it, but just to explain that you sort of shouldn't trust your mind, because you're probably more stuck than you realize, and a lot of the inertia of moving forward is something that you're embodying, and our culture, I think, is convincing us, selling us a story where we're not held back by it, but when we are. But when you have a baby, they change and develop so fast. It's crazy. Now, I when my baby was born, I received loads of gifts, loads of gifts. So many generous, loving strangers, because we were in a bit of a position at the time, gave us clothes and toys and everything. They were amazing. And he was like under 3 kilos when he was born. He came a month early. And I received gifts of clothes for a baby that was, say, 3 or 4 months old. And actually I kind of so-called had too much stuff in that it was overwhelming. Like, I was looking after the baby full time in strange circumstances, and I didn't have time to go through everything that I received, so the things that were bigger were kind of like stuffed in another cupboard. But I remember thinking, I thought to myself, I should donate this on. He's like much smaller than this. Like, I didn't realise, I did cognitively realise it would take 3 or 4 months till he'll grow into it, but I didn't really realise. And it's hard to come to terms with how fast babies grow. Also children, also teenagers, also people in their 20s, but of course the fastest acceleration mathematically is from 0 to 1 day, 0 to 2 days, 2 days to 4 months, compared to, a 20-year-old being 20 years old in 4 months, or 20 years old in 2 days. And now that he's at kindergarten, he's not yet 1 year old, he's all the time getting viruses, which, thank God, his immune system, I think, please God, is strong, and he's shaking them off. He vomited last night, he had diarrhea this morning, but he doesn't have a temperature, he's smiling and he's happy, and it's gone through his system. The asthma symptoms are something I've got to treat, but yeah, other than that, he's keeps on growing, keeps on going in these directions, trying to stand up, moving, all the time growing. And we just forget that that's the nature of life. We're so, as adults, and particularly when we're at the age when fertility is kind of drying up, if you pardon the metaphor, but it's like waning, you're no longer at your most fertile peak, we become stuck on these ideas of ourselves. And is that age appropriate? I don't know. Years ago I went to a wedding and I met there a guy with his mother, and his mother I'd known socially from the community from 10 years ago, and she was clearly suffering from early onset Alzheimer's. And so she couldn't remember me, but I remembered her. So I didn't know she had Alzheimer's. I thought she was forgetful at first, so I introduced her. I gave her my name, and her late husband's name was something similar. So I said, "Hi, my name is so-and-so." She said, "Oh, such a beautiful name. My late husband was called so-and-so. He was such a lovely man. I miss him. We had so much good times together." And she kind of had this faint smile as she looked into her past in the distance. And then 5 minutes later she asked me my name again, and then 5 minutes later. But what made such an impression on me, apart from the sadness that I could see she was suffering from this and it was obviously going to get worse, was that she wasn't really, she was kind of reliving her personality again and again and again. And if she'd had a horrible relationship, or she was an angry person, then every time I would say that thing that would provoke the memory of her husband, it could provoke, he made my life. It could be a complaint, basically, instead of a memory of love. And of course, the fact that she had loving memories of him and of appreciation and gratitude resonated with the energy that she gave out to the world. So now, it's a good question whether or not we need to become that shell of an individual. If you have a cognitive decline, like Alzheimer's, then there's not much choice because it's a disease. But if you don't have Alzheimer's, I mean, it's a question, would like a Buddha who lived in the present ever have Alzheimer's? I guess they could because it's cognitive, but the idea being that if you live every moment anew and every moment afresh, then would you be like that? You know, I'm sure you've met people who are older who are miserable gits, and they're just like repeating miserable git thought patterns the whole time. And obviously you could have a Pollyanna thought pattern again and again, but how much better to come fresh to every moment? And that's what babies do, and that's what children do. They come fresh to every moment. There are clearly things which are ingrained, clearly, like it's clear as day to me from observing my lovely son. But the point of this is to say that, like, if you're considering fertility treatments or the journey to solo motherhood, you have to be careful of the tricks that your mind can play on you. Number one, the trick of thinking that things are the illusion of control and the trick of permanence. I mean, if you go through the IVF route and you have multiple tries, it's brutal. And everything is like very elevated and leveraged because of all these high levels of hormones pumped into your body. Normally, that's the current protocol. Maybe medicine will change, but so you're like tricking your body into massive change via the hormones. But whilst you're resisting making a move, it's a mistake. It's a mistake if you do it now rather than tomorrow, because you're more likely to. Well, I've said this a million times, but I mean, if you're considering infertility, don't let your mind trick you as to how things are going to be, is what I'm trying to say. When you have a baby and you have a child, you're forced to deal with reality. So dealing with infertility or dealing with potential looming age-related infertility is dealing with reality. So congratulations, like that's the direction to go to if you want to be a mother. When you're, oh my god, flies on my scabs on my leg. When you have a child, and this isn't like a solo motherhood thing, it's all mothers, but it's because of the challenges, it's more, well, goodness knows, I don't know anyone else's journey, but for example, this week when you have to deal with reality, and if you escape the ideas of how things are meant to be, then you're not living in tune with the reality of what a child is. So for example, he started resisting taking the puffer. He was very compliant before, and I think we were on a crazy protocol, which I've now stopped and gone after seeing the specialist at the hospital, where he was taking electric inhalation. Like every 3 hours they're giving him 45 minutes of electronic inhalation. And whereas before I could put the puffer, which is where you go like that, on his face, and he was very compliant, now he starts crying whenever I give it to him, and it's absolutely awful. So I have to give it to him, otherwise we might end up in intensive care again. But I can't explain that to him. I try and explain it to him, but I started off with him crying and screaming, and me hating what it was turning me into, which was kind of like, I have to get this done, you have to do what I say, stop screaming, you're getting in my way. And I hated finding myself in that mode, because I don't think it's a very loving mode. And obviously love is doing and taking care of him is giving him the medication that he needs. So it wasn't so much that as it was that I found myself slipping into that kind of like personality as a mother. I know that personality. I don't like it. I don't think it's good mothering. So I had some conversations with various friends. Some conversations I found more like everyone understands what the dilemma is. And then a friend said, well, he's nearly one. Explain to him what you're doing. He's beginning to understand words. He probably understands more than you think. He probably understands, she said. I can't believe he understands. But like, explain that you're doing it for his own good, and explain that the drugs are going to his medication's going to his lungs to open up the asthma. So I started changing it. And then I realized that when I was giving him the medication, I was doing it on my agenda and not his. Meaning, I was sort of, well, I have to give it to him at a certain time. There has to be like a certain number of hours intervals between giving the medication. But I was not being sensitive to where he was in that moment before I gave him the medication. Like 5 or 10 minutes till he would be calm could make a difference. Even if he started screaming anyhow the moment the mask touches his face. So that was like another step towards going towards reality. And now it's settled somewhat. He's still crying every time, but whereas I was personalizing when he was crying before, now I see that after he's cried, when he's taken it, he's happy again. So he's beginning to realize, I think, that it's temporary, and even if he doesn't, it is temporary, and then he's happy again. Then another thing was coming to kindergarten, because the kindergarten is certain hours, and I'm the kind of person who's normally late for stuff. And so I was dropping him off like at the latest possible time. And whereas he started the kindergarten like very sociable, very happy, now I saw that whenever I dropped him off, he was crying. When I picked him up, he was crying. And when I pulled him out in the middle of the day 1 or 2 times to give him the medication, he was also crying. It was extremely disruptive. And then I realised that I had control. That is the reality, that if I arrive when he's there and there are lots of younger kids there who are all screaming and crying, at first I was like complaining that he's being like infected by the other babies that are crying because they're younger and less adaptive to the environment. And then I realised that this is the reality, that if I drop him late and there's a whole room of babies crying, he's going to pick up on their distress. But I do have control over the situation, and although I identify as someone who is perpetually late, and I am normally very late for stuff, I can actually change things and arrive very early. So he's one of the first kids in kindergarten, and then he's likely to not be so distressed, and that's exactly what I did this morning. Which sounds like a small thing, but for me it's a big deal. Like, I got up, I made sure we got there super early and not in the later area of the window of time. And you know, also I was fighting reality because I was expecting the kindergarten teachers or the assistants, whatever, to be more accommodating and gentle when I dropped them off towards the end of the window of time. But the fact is that even if they should treat a child just as patiently when the drop-off time is later as earlier, the fact is they've got lots of screaming kids behind them. They can't. So I was like fighting with reality and complaining with it instead of adjusting myself to it. And I think the thing about having a baby is that because he's not living according to the ideas of how things should be, whereas I am, then when I adjust things according to the reality, he adjusts to it. Like, he doesn't resist it because it's not the idea of how things are meant to be and what he's used to. If it suits him, then he adjusts to it. It's very sort of pure. So, bringing all of this back into the realm of your fertility. Your fertility is age-related as well as related to other things, but it's primarily driven, like if all other things are equal, the thing that's really driving it is your biological age. And I know how much I wanted to resist that, but that is the reality. And you will have a more harmonious experience of life when you live according to reality. It doesn't mean being stuck in your head, it means taking action. As much action as you can. I was very, very stressed from the age of 29 about not being married. And it's just like an idea. It's a reality, but it's an idea. The only thing to do is to take action to move in that direction, and it works or it doesn't work. But being recognizing that fertility is age-related and taking steps towards a remedy, whatever remedy works for you, is what's important. And I sort of like recommend to go around with two hats. One hat is very black and white based, reality based, statistically based, and the other is what I'd call strategic magical thinking. What do I mean? I started off at the beginning of this video emphasizing that, like, babies show us how reality is changing the whole time. Their bodies are changing, they're in the moment, he's teaching me to be more in the moment. Like, you know, I had a terrible week where he was sick and I was sick and we were in hospital and this and that. But now I'm not sick anymore. He's not sick anymore. We're no longer in the hospital. And so the rest of it is just like remnants in my head. If I complain about it, then I'm reliving it. But it's gone, it's done, it's in the past. He's now happy, I'm now well rested. Now I have to see what has to happen next. But we're living, what I'm saying is that when you're in your 30s or your 40s and you're a consumer, we're powerful in our heads because we maybe have some money, or we're adults, we can go out and there's choice in dating in restaurants and in cafes. And it's power in potential, but it's not actuality, and therefore it's not reality, it's just an idea in our head. And so the one hat has to be reality based, saying, you know, all other things being equal, my fertility is going down, and and yes, I could be the exception to the rule, but I've got to assume I'm not, which I refuse to do. I believed I was the exception to the rule. And the other is strategic magical thinking, which is do what you need to do in order to be positive, to beat the odds, to keep your positivity and mood up, and to keep pushing forward, to kind of figure out at the back of your head what you need to do in order to remedy the situation, to get what you want. And then, because you're going to have all of this resistance, because we are these repetitive stories of what we tell ourselves, and so you're breaking out of that and you're going to have internal resistance, have the magical thinking to get you through. But don't rely on magical thinking. So make the magical thinking strategic. So, you know, I went through 6 years of fertility treatments before I conceived. Well, I didn't conceive my boy. He was conceived in the laboratory. He was implanted in me and my body accepted the embryo, and the embryo was healthy. and it continued, thank God, to full term, but it took a long time and it was awful. I'm motivated to make these videos in order to save anyone else, any other woman going through hell when it could be avoided because of age-related infertility. But I remember how hard it was to get my head around it, to get my emotions around it, to get my soul around it, to get everything around the journey to solo motherhood. So, and it's, I don't think you can expect it to be easy or natural, although some women do, but for me it was all a massive struggle. So kind of do what you need to do. I don't know how to put it otherwise. You have to work with reality. And what do babies teach us? They teach us not to complain. Do not complain. Deal with the situation. Do what has to be done and don't complain. And don't complain. And do what has to be done and deal with the situation and don't complain. And reality keeps on changing, and you keep on changing your response to reality as you're taking in what reality is, not what your idea of reality is. And you know, I even see that now when he's resisting the puffer. As I'm giving it to him, I can hear myself sighing as oh, he's going to resist this. He's going to be crying when I give him the puffer. But maybe one day he'll stop. I should be looking at him to see his response. And if he is really crying, it's like, okay, he is crying because I put the puffer near him. But maybe he's not going to cry all the way through. But like if he does cry all the way through, I'm not denying that either. But not labeling him also as a baby who always cries when I put the puffer on him. Well, I hope that's clear. I'm not sure how clearly I articulated all of that, so I might have a bit of editing, post-editing, but I hope I've drawn the thread between what I learned after having a baby and what a baby teaches about dealing with reality and dealing with age-related infertility before you have the baby in order to reduce suffering. Have a good day.